spazieren durch den Abend. Und bevor es losgeht, bekommen wir direkt ein paar Details geliefert zu dem, was uns gleich erwartet. Hier bei mir stehen Léo Warynski, Dirigent des Konzerts und auch Gründer und Leiter des Vokalensembles Les Métaboles. Und genau, das Ensemble ist hier heute zu Gast und direkt neben mir, jetzt haben wir auch noch mehr Licht, Stanisław Suchora. Er ist der künstlerische Leiter von Sonora, einer Plattform in Polen für Künstler und Veranstaltungen, die Projekte mit zeitgenössischer Musik realisiert. Auf ihn geht auch die Programmidee des heutigen Abends zurück. Wie gesagt, wir hören Musik von Luigi Nono, einer entscheidenden Figur der Nachkriegsavantgarde, die auch in besonderem Maße Musik und politisches Engagement zusammengedacht hat. Von ihm hören wir Quando stanno morendo von 1982 und vorab gibt es die deutsche Erstaufführung von The Sixth Commandment der polnischen Komponistin Elżbieta Sikora, auch ein politisches Stück. So, Stanisław, as a little help for the audience, could you briefly tell us who is the composer and what's the topic of her piece and what's the idea behind the combination of the two works tonight?
Okay, so first of all, just a few words about Elżbieta Sikora. She's like the grande dame of electronic music in Poland and of contemporary music in Poland. Like, she's one of the founding members of the Polish Radio Experimental Studio, which is more or less contemporary to the ones in Cologne and in Paris and elsewhere. And nowadays she's one of those leading composers from our country. I'll switch to the third question, like how did it happen? The whole project is, I mean, it's a little bit of a guilty pleasure of just, you know, choosing the composers and music you love, and which happened to match, which maybe we'll develop further on. And yeah, both pieces, Quando stanno morendo by Luigi Nono and Elżbieta Sikora's Sixth Commandment, are engaged pieces. So Nono wrote it 40 years ago when the martial law was installed in Poland, when the communist regime tried to suppress the workers' unions and the Solidarność movement. And for him it was like a very difficult moment because he was like a true believing communist, and at the same time he could see the communist regime suppressing workers' movement. So it was very difficult for him, and he had to somehow process it, and it resulted in that piece, which is dedicated to the Poles and those who struggle without hope, who are in prison, and so on and so on. And Elżbieta Sikora's piece, like, we wanted it to match it, not only in terms of instrumental and vocal setup, but also in terms of its inhalt. And this is also a piece which is her sort of memento, something which speaks about the political violence and so on. So on the one hand, we have historical texts of the survivals of the concentration camp in Majdanek in Poland, but also the texts by contemporary composers Grzegorz Kwiatkowski from Poland and Ahmedjan Osman, who is an important Uyghur dissident poet currently living in exile. So that's the background.
That's the background. Okay. Noch ein Hinweis, die Texte können Sie auch nachlesen, wenn Sie mögen. Die stehen in dem Programmheft. So, Léo, in terms of the music itself, what is challenging both in Nono's piece and also in Sikora's piece?
Yeah, you know, the radicality of Luigi Nono, you can feel in the way he's composing, especially for voices. It's very demanding for the women voices, because he likes to use extreme ambitious, very high notes, very soft, to give the sensation of something very hard and the effort of the singers. It's very specific, and Luigi Nono is a professional for big contrast. You know, there is a tension in his music between softness and sometimes very rude things, very brutal. And there is a game between the voices and the instruments on stage and the performance in the hall, the electronic. And what I find very extraordinary in Luigi Nono music is the way it's combining very musically the electronic and all the possibilities. You will hear tonight. The sound will turn, will be destroyed or disturbing by the electronic, and it creates a very specific atmosphere. So it's the challenge for me is to combine these acoustic and electronic things together, and always to keep the spirit of the work, what you said about these pieces and the spirit of these pieces. And for Elżbieta Sikora, what is interesting in the piece is the opposition between the four voices, the four women, and the instruments who are illustrating what the text is saying. And the text is very strong. There is a lot of language tonight, Uyghur, French, German, English, and I forget, Polish too. So that's a kind of challenging things for the singers.
And it is sung and spoken as it is in Nono's piece as well?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And then perhaps one concluding question before we hear the piece. So Elżbieta's piece is music from the present, but partly dealing with text from the past. And Nono's piece is 40 years old, as you said. So how do both pieces nevertheless relate to the present now?
I would like to say there are no connection with present, but that's a pity that unfortunately it's very, very actual. I mean, we are not far from Poland, we are not far from Ukraine here. We know exactly what happens. No, not exactly, but what happens in Europe and all the threats. Because we are in Germany, but in France, we are sometimes a little worried about, the extremism who are growing up. And yes, I think it's a rule of the music to remind that yes, there are danger, and yes, it's the history is a kind of circle, so we have to be very careful, I think.
Yeah. Okay. If you want to add something.
Well, actually, I do. Well, the question is how those things are actual. The little we can do, and the composer and the musicians can do. We can, for instance, tonight give the voice to this Uyghur poet. We have had all the Olaf Scholz going to China last week, and probably not talking much about the problem. I mean, we can at least give voices to those who don't have them. And it was very weird for us when we were rehearsing to the project. The war in Ukraine was going on already, and in the piece of Nono, you have repeated question, Moska, Kisei, like Moscow, who are you? And it was like really thrilling for us. I mean, certain things, unfortunately, don't change much. So that's how this 40 years old piece is somehow, unfortunately, still of actuality.
Yeah, nice or bad coincidence. Yeah. Okay, thank you for this introduction. Viel Vergnügen mit dem Stück von Elżbieta Sikora jetzt erst.